Welcome to this edition of our program, Daily Debate. As usual, we will be discussing an important debate. Today we'll be speaking about Egypt and Africa towards new horizons of cooperation. Egypt has always been keen on achieving economic integration, laying foundation of comprehensive sustainable development for all Africans. Egypt has always been keen on reinforcing the pivotal role in Africa by strengthening trade and investment relations with the countries of the continent, in addition to transferring modern technology among the African countries. Today we'll be focusing on the Egyptian-African relations, plus the pivotal role Egypt is playing in order to strengthen and boost relation among the African states at large. We'll be speaking about that with our distinguished guest, Dr. Amany Asfour, President of Africa Business Council. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Before we delve into our discussion, let me first have the top story of the day. And Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli said that national projects established by the government doubles the GDP. The Prime Minister said that the tax exemption limit, both for the public and private sectors, is expected to be raised so that an employee's salary could reach £2,500 without paying taxes. The Premier said that the Egyptian government has been keen to take additional steps for social protection in accordance with the directives of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. He also said that this is so that the number of families benefiting from the Takaful and Karama, a social protection program run by the Ministry of Social Solidarity, has reached 4.1 million families, equal to 17 million individuals, after adding 450,000 new families. He added that the cash support budget for the targeted families increased to more than £22 billion annually in 2022. Compared to £3.7 billion in 2014. Dr. Madbouli explained that the average strategic stock of goods covers up to 6 months, and the supply subsidy has been increased to £90 billion. The state budget was set on the basis that the price of a barrel of oil is $60, but as a result of the Russian-Ukraine war, the price of a barrel rose to $120 a barrel. Dr. Madbouli stated that the total fuel subsidy in the next fiscal year's state budget is approximately £30 billion to mainly support fuel and the LPG, explaining that the government has established general precautions for the state intervention in the next fiscal year in the event that prices rise unexpectedly. Moving on to our topic of the day, and before we delve into our discussion, let me first take the first report. And Egypt seeks to lead African efforts to accelerate the Sustainable Development's goal, tackle security challenges. That is according to President Sisi. Let's watch.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السيدات والسادة الحضور الكريم.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said that Egypt seeks to crystallize a joint African vision that accelerates the Sustainable Development Goals (SDGs) agenda and climate action, as well as boosting the African inter-cooperation in partnership with the global and regional partners. El-Sisi made his statements in a recorded video message aired during the opening of the third edition of the two-day Aswan Forum for Sustainable Peace and Development that kicked off in Cairo. The president noted that the forum comes amid serious challenges with significant political and economic repercussions on development. He said that the challenges are being reflected on the African continent, mainly on its food security, energy security, health, economy, that confers on us the responsibility of helping our economies to be resilient against the external shocks. Touching upon the food crisis in Africa amid both the war in Ukraine and the COVID-19 pandemic, President El-Sisi asserted the necessity of adopting a package of urgent and effective procedures in coordination with the international community and global partners to contain the impacts of this crisis and maintain the security of the African supply chains. He also urged sustainable measures for supporting food security and the agriculture sector as well, stressing that the continent needs to raise its agricultural production, paving the way for self-efficiency amid the ongoing challenges of water scarcity, price hikes, and climate change. The head of state also stressed that other challenges must be dealt with, especially the stability of peace and security in the continent, protecting our countries from terrorism, proliferation, weapon smuggling, human trafficking, and illegal immigration, noting that all these challenges need innovative solutions to cope with and effective mechanisms to overcome. Talking about the UN Climate Change Conference 2022, the COP27, which Egypt is set to host in November as the voice of Africa, El-Sisi expounded that Aswan Forum, in its third edition, is a unique opportunity to shed light on the climate change threat and its related impacts, which are linked with the peace and security issues in the continent as well. The President also urged the international community to fulfill its pledges towards African countries, especially developing and the low-income countries, mainly for adaptation to climate change and doubling the finances dedicated to it. Egypt's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sameh Shoukry, said that Aswan Forum mirrors the role Egypt plays in Africa for the sake of boosting its peace and development, and reflects the importance Egypt attributes to reach practical solutions to the troubles the continent is suffering. He added that Egypt's efforts in this area are in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals Agenda 2030, Egypt's Vision 2030, and the Africa We Need Agenda 2063. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, said in a recorded message that only 2% of the global investments in the renewables goes to Africa, while it is the most affected area by the climate change crisis. Guterres added that the continent needs investments in health, job creation, poverty reduction, boosting its growth and health systems, as the war in Ukraine, along with the climate change and the COVID-19, have affected it severely.
Right, welcome back. And these were the words of President Sisi addressing the third edition of the Aswan Forum, since Aswan is the capital of Africa this year. Let me get back to Dr. Amany Asfour, President of the Africa Business Council. Thank you again for being with us. Let me go ahead with our questions. And indeed, as President Sisi said, that Egypt has been always keen to crystallize a joint African vision towards sustaining or towards accelerating with the sustainable development goals of our own Africa. How do you view that, and how far did we go in that?
Well, this is very important because aligning, for instance, the 2030 vision of Egypt with the Africa we want, which is Africa 2063 Development Agenda, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals, it all matches with really for what we really need as an African continent, a prosperous, peaceful, integrated, intellectual Africa driven by the citizens of Africa and playing its role in the international arena. Mm-hmm. So if we know that this, the main issue for SDGs is, first one is ending poverty, which is exactly what we are trying to do. Second is really ending hunger. The third is about health. Fourth is about education. The fifth is about gender equality and women empowerment. And it's really about the life on land, the life underwater, the climate change, the equality of the citizenships, the economic growth and decent work, global partnership, peace and security, justice. So all the 17 goals, actually, it is geared towards our real development across the continent. And if we see that for instance, during the presidency of Egypt under His Excellency Abdel Fattah Sisi 2019 of the African Union, he already stressed on the infrastructure, on the energy, which is what needed on the continent. The ACFTA, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, was launched under the presidency of Egypt to the African Union. So the major flagship program of the ACFTA, which is really what we really need to get out our people from poverty, to see how we can have a real integration among our continent, to promote our infrastructure, our energy, is what we are really seeking, and what Egypt is really seeking to see how with a partnership with international institutions, with global partners, to see how we can empower Africa with power. That's very important, because energy and infrastructure is two major things in order to see how we can promote our real integration and industrialization on the continent.
Actually, you opened all these sectors that I have prepared for to speak about. But let me start with intra-investment or intra-trade relations between African states, because that has been a main priority at the recent stage, or the few years ago. How do you view how we boosted the intra-African relations, particularly during the past few years?
Well, as you rightly mentioned, the intra-Africa trade is so low among ourselves. It's less than 16% compared to Europe, for instance, 68%, or to Asia, which is also above 60%. So the ACFTA, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, seeks to see how we can have our real increase our intra-Africa trade and boost our intra-Africa trade and operationalize the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And that really needs a lot of factors. The first one, as we mentioned, is the real infrastructure, which is about how we can move across the continent with goods, with people, how we can have roads, railways, aviation, maritime. And in a recent study for the ECA, Economic Commission for Africa, UN, about the transport sector, we need 2 million trucks. We need 100,000 train wagon-leaf train compartments. We need 60,000 kilometers. We need a huge industrialization and aviation and maritime in order to make this happen across the continent. This is with the transport and infrastructure. Again, the renewable energy is a huge sector that Africa is looking for, because if we want to do industrialization, we need energy. The third point is really about the human capacity. And that's why now the AU summit that's running now is in Zambia, the main theme of it is resilience for nutrition, for food security, strengthening agriculture, and strengthening our human capital, economic and social. The human capital of the African continent, which is 1.3 billion people, is our real treasure. It's our real fortune, but it is not yet really empowered. We need to have a lot of education. We need to have a lot of investment in our human resources, especially women and youth.
Actually, population in Africa, particularly young population, because Africa is rich with its young population, is a source of richness, but also it is a big challenge. And when we speak about the growth in population enormously, as we are seeing, we have to really secure, as you said, respectively, all these populations in all these nations in the proper way, economically and socially, as you respectively said. So Egypt has worked on several files in order to be able to go on with plans for empowering the calibers or the African calibers. But we started with security, stability, and building. You spoke about the infrastructure, and Egypt has been urging the African countries to benefit from both the public and private sector in this area, the infrastructure. So how do you view the role played by the private sector and the public sector as well, or the state's efforts in this concern?
Well, you're right, you pinpointed on a crucial issue with the role of the private sector. That's why exactly by the decision summit of in line with the decision summits of the African heads of states, the Africa Business Council was established for boosting our intra-Africa trade, for the strengthening of our private sector and unifying the voice of the African private sector to be the arm of the African Union that implements our agenda of the Africa we want. So the Africa Business Council, our founding vision is a competitive, innovative, borderless Africa driven for trade, investment and industrialization. So this really founding vision summarizes what we really want with the public-private sector dialogue, what we need to invest in with reference to our industrialization agenda. So our strategy, I call it the triad of empowerment, is based on 3 pillars. First pillar is the private sector strengthening, including SMEs, women and youth, because the major backbone of the economy is our small medium enterprise. Yes. And recently, only last week, there was the African Union annual SME forum, which Africa Business Council was partnering with African Union to see the roadmap agenda for empowering our small medium enterprises. The second pillar is about policy advocacy. So what we need from the governments is very important. What we are advocating for now is to have at least 40% for all the government procurement goes to African private sector. Because I always say that what's present on the African soil should not be brought from any other country across the outside the continent. So we are currently trying to see mapping exercise for the existing products and to see how we can really promote this advocacy with reference to the government procurement policy. The third pillar is about product development. How can we have a competitive, a quality, a value-added product that we as African be proud of, but also we trade among ourselves. You cannot just bring, if we want to increase trade, we cannot get containers from outside the continent and trade among ourselves. We need to. But we now want to see how the ACFTA, we really have the tariff barriers and the non-tariff barriers. The non-tariff barriers is very important to see how we can overcome it. How can a new protocol, there is also a new protocol with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is about women and youth in trade, to see how we empower our women and youth, because as you mentioned, the youth is a huge component of our continent. More than 60% of the African continent are youth less than 30 years. So a creation of jobs, finding really opportunities for our youth in trade is very important. So the whole agenda of the Africa we want is geared towards how can the private sector play its role with the development agenda. So under Africa Business Council, we have technical committees for energy, for infrastructure, for investment, for transport and logistics, for agriculture and agribusiness. And here I want to say something, because as we even heard now about the food security, the African continent during now the crisis in the world with the Ukraine-Russia crisis, we have felt how it is very, very, very big difficulty to have access to our main food security. While in Africa we have 60% arable land in Africa that could be cultivated and it is not used till now. So how are we going to use our arable land, 60% of the African continent, of the African agriculture is a huge pillar that we can be the basket of the whole world, food basket. But this also is geared towards how we can have expertise and scientific experience, and that's Egypt is very good in agriculture and agribusiness, It could be a huge resource to our African continent to see how we can train the small-scale farmers across the continent to really cultivate with vital crops. So it is very important this. So among also the technical committees that we have for tourism, for creative industry, hospitality industry, healthcare and pharmaceuticals. And here we can also say about the recently Africa Health conference that was organized here in Egypt very successfully, and see how we can have our pharmaceutical drugs within Africa. I always say here in Egypt we have 165 pharmaceutical industry, while still Africa is importing its pharmaceutical from outside the continent. Same comes with medical consumables and supplies. In Egypt here we have more than 400 industries, while until now many countries are having their medical consumable supplies from outside the continent. So what is the leakage? How can we really increase our intra-Africa trade? We need more information. We need more collaboration. We need more integration. That's why Africa Business Council, under its umbrella, we have now the Chambers of Commerce, the private sector federations, the Union of Industries, the manufacturers associations, the SMEs, the large corporates. So all the REX Business Council, like COMESA Business Council that I was honored to chair for 2 terms, is now on my board. The SADC Business Council, which is for the Southern Africa countries, the ECOWAS, which is the FOASI, which is the Federation of West Africa Chambers of Commerce, the East Africa Chamber of Commerce, all are coming under one umbrella to see how the private sector can play its role within our real integration.
Yes. One more issue that is very crucial for developing this, or going on, or sustaining with the SDGs for goals for the African continent is funds. The issue of funding, especially sustained one. We're speaking about how can we as Africa sustain with our developmental goals without securing the proper funds for our projects. And that has been an issue that the President has raised high, particularly when there was this latest meeting here in Cairo of the Afrexim Bank, for an instance, or the IBED Bank, or other big funding institutions, the World Bank and so on. How do you view that issue, and how crucial is that?
Well, this is a very important, because financing our projects is very important, and developmental projects. So it has been raised in many occasions, even the recent that I was attending with the Afrexim Bank. It's very important that we empower our African banks to be big banks. And that was exactly what was said in one of the plenary sessions, that we need, like if we talk about big banks in America, they are able to finance with very low interest rates. We need to empower our African banks. We need to have big banks in Africa, so we finance our own agenda. It's very important that we really work on that. Also, financial inclusion, even for big projects, but also for our SMEs, and financial inclusion for the major startups, the innovations, the whole ideas, the project, the real African continent projects is very important to have access to finance, and to have also digital payment financial inclusion. So access to finance is a huge challenge, but if all Africa comes together, and also if the private sector can come together, and that's why also one of the technical committees we have after Africa Business Council is the Financial Services and Financing Committee, to see how we have the financial institutions within the continent make sure that they finance our real developmental agenda.
We'll get back to that, because this is a very important issue that you raised here, and definitely the private sector will have to stress on that again. But before we move on with our discussion, let me take this second report. And Egypt calls for facilitating Africa's access to financing for green transformation, since we're hosting the upcoming COP27. So let's watch.
Minister of International Cooperation, Dr. Rania Al-Mashat, participated in the summit of the International Development Agency of the World Bank Group, which was held in Senegal. Al-Mashat delivered a speech of Egypt on behalf of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in the summit that was chaired by Macky Sall, President of Senegal, which is presiding the African Union for 2022. Egypt calls for facilitating Africa's access to financing for green transformation. Minister of International Cooperation, Rania Al-Mashat, held a meeting with Frederica Mayer, representative of the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, in Egypt. Dr. Rania Al-Mashat, Egypt's Minister of International Cooperation, participated in the summit of the International Development Agency of the World Bank Group, which was held in Senegal. The summit was chaired by the President of Senegal and chairing the African Union for 2022. The Egyptian minister also delivered the speech of Egypt on behalf of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. She noted that the presidency of Egypt for the United Nations Conference on Climate Change COP27 will work to direct the attention of the international community to development challenges in the continent of Africa and to enhance joint cooperation between the relevant parties to support the green transformation on the continent. Al-Mashat added that providing financing for development is vital since Africa is among the least regions that contribute to harmful emissions but are the most affected. The summit was held to discuss achieving a flexible recovery in Africa following the repercussions of the corona pandemic, the Russian-Ukrainian war, and the role of the International Development Agency in combating poverty in the countries of the continent. The African Summit focuses on 5 main axes: economic transformation, agriculture and livestock food security, human capital, digital innovations and technology, and the energy transition.
Right, welcome back, and back to you, Dr. Amany. And indeed, the African Summit has focused on these 5 main axes: the economic transformation, the agriculture, livestock, food security, human capital, digital innovations, and technology, definitely, and the energy transition. But let's pick up with what we ended with, which is the private sector, and how important is it for the private sector to exist in order to be able to achieve or to realize the AFCFTA potentials?
So the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is really about us, the African people. And it's about African trade. So who is going to trade among each other? It's the African private sector. Who's going to invest in industrialization? It's the private sector. It's the whole role of the private sector, the driver for economic growth. And it is really about also the small medium enterprises, which is the backbone of the economy. So the role of the private sector is really about integration agenda, how we can export and import among ourselves. That's why with a mapping exercise of what's existing on the continent, who are the manufacturing, what are we manufacturing on the continent, and this is a study that we are currently doing to see how can the East Africa trade with West Africa, North with West with Center, all of us as Africa know. So if something is present in Benin or in Nigeria or in Eswatini, whatever, or something in Egypt, so they don't have to send it to get it from outside the continent. So this is really about getting information, about making trade mission among ourselves, about access to information. And when we have the access to information and what's existing on the continent, also with raw materials, how we use our scientific expertise to add value to those raw materials. One of the things we are working actually now is about agriculture, agribusiness. How, because currently, for instance, all the macadamia and the nuts goes to Vietnam to be roasted and packed and then sold again to the Gulf area or other parts of the world. Why it is not roasted and packaged in the African continent and then
exporting it?
Yeah, minerals. Minerals is very important. If we take about all the minerals across the whole continent, it is also exported as such without adding value to it. So this is the part of how we can empower the private sector within the continent to make its role with reference to value addition and the whole supply chain. We have seen what happened now with the global crisis. The global supply chain has been interrupted, and we have really had a lack across the continent. Why? Although we have all the natural resources, because we are dependent on manufacturers from outside the continent. We need to cut this intermediary. We need to see how we have our own raw materials, added value to it within the continent. We have all the raw materials of the world, but how we can add value to it, this is by the technology. So how can our scientific institutes see how we can add value, how we use this scientific expertise, as I always say, from the industry, from the lab to industry, from the mine to the market, how we can have it within the whole supply chain within our African continent.
Dr. Amany, I think that during this upcoming COP27, this very important conference that will be taking place in Egypt by November, we will be addressing the true challenges, the real challenges of Africa at large, because I guess that Egypt will be the voice of Africa hosting this global conference and speaking on behalf of the African continent at large. We had our own challenges even before we were hardly hit by new challenges, including, of course, the pandemic and this recent war. How far do you think will the COP27 really manage to speak up the African challenges, and how far do you think, or in other words, what do we need from the international community at this upcoming stage? We are no contributors to anything, by the way. We're no contributors to the gas emission, we're not contributors to pollution, we're not even contributors to wars. So how do you think, or what do we need from the international community?
I think the COP this year is very important because, as you rightly mentioned, it's the voice of Africa. Africa is the most affected while it is the least contributing. Yeah, if any contribution, all the industrialized countries are the ones who are really contributing to the carbon emission. So what we really need from the international community is their commitment. The commitment in order to see how we can have really a real address to the African challenges that is not caused by Africa. How one of the things is really about, we are organizing two meetings actually alongside the summit. One is for climate justice. It's very important, women and climate justice, because also women are mostly affected by the climate. And the other one is the role of the private sector investment in green economy and blue economy, which is really about what is our role of the private sector to see how we can promote this renewable. And having said that, during the Egypt Can by industrialization that was organized here in Egypt, I had all my team with African Business Council and private sector that went and visited the Suez Economic Zone, which was really a huge thing with reference to green hydrogen and green economy. And it really shows the vision of Egypt of how we are promoting the green economy and how can Egypt be really a good scientific expertise within the whole continent in partnership with global partners to promote the renewable energy and promote the green economy, and speak with the voice of Africa that what can the international community now, how they compensate Africa and how they finance development.
Indeed. And I guess that's what we really need for this upcoming stage. And I guess that Egypt is one of the most countries who are very much with potentials for the hydrogen or towards green transformation. But that's it. I have to end it here because my time is out. And Dr. Amany Asfour, President of the Africa Business Council, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I hope you had a good Eid al-Adha. And I guess that these were very blessed days. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to be with you in Daily Debate.
Thank you. Dear viewers, many thanks for watching. Next Sunday would be another important debate with another colleague. Good night.